All right, everybody, welcome to an emergency edition of the Everyday Sens podcast. I know people heard that cough. It's just me today going on my own here. Brennan has to run to work. Obviously, it's an emergency if I'm doing this on my own. So bear with me, load up the chat so we have some stuff to talk about because obviously, there's a lot to talk about. Pierre Dorion officially resigns, I think, as general manager of the Ottawa Senators. Michael Andlauer was a little bit cryptic about that, but I don't know if people stuck around when they closed the stream. Ian Mendez went up to him, and you could kind of hear it still, just clarifying. It sounds like it was more mutual than we're led to believe, but we're going with he's fired. I think it was the writing was on the wall, blah, 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 whatever you want to say. So thanks, everyone, for joining here. We'll wait for more people to join in. I don't know who's going to come, but this is a crazy, crazy day in Ottawa Senators land. Let's go through the last, day or so. Let's talk about it. They were fined a first-round pick for the Evgeny Dadonov situation, which, again, I'm going to get into what Andlauer said about everything because it was very, very candid, a very good press conference from the owner of the Ottawa Senators. Another thing that we're going to talk about is Steve Staios taking over as interim general manager. And I'm doing this on my own here. This is just me and the people watching. It's a discussion with all of us. So throw in your thoughts. I'm going to throw them up on the screen as much as I can, as often as we can. Because this is really it's a monumental moment in Senators history. And I know the ownership was a big one too, but that's more unprecedented. This was the longest tenured GM, or one of the longest tenured GMs in the NHL. And he was the GM since 2016. I don't know about you guys watching, but for me, I was in the spring of grade 9 in 2016. I was just in the middle of my grade 9 year. And now I've graduated university. So it's been quite a while since Pierre Dorion was the general manager. 8 seasons, 8 years. This was obviously the beginning of his 8th season. And there's a lot to break down. First of all, I just closed the press conference for myself there. And I want everyone to let me know, when you're watching here, what did you guys think of not Pierre Dorion, Michael Andlauer? A lot of questions, easily the most candid he's been since buying the team. He, to me, just felt very candid. I will run through some quotes here, obviously. Just going to read them off of my phone. And a couple, we'll get into the Shane Pinto gambling stuff because that's different. And we did talk about that on our last episode, Brennan and I did, but that was kind of, it's weird because it was a joint presser. It felt like there were 3 things to talk about. It was address the Shane Pinto gambling thing, which was a national story, international story, then address the Evgeny Dadonov thing. So 2 big things that the league brought the hammer down on the Sens, 2 penalties, a suspension, and a draft pick fine. And then they don't have a GM anymore. So Steve Staios is named the interim GM of the Ottawa Senators. So 3 big things. So again, if I'm not suggesting there is, I don't think anyone would be doing this, but if there's disdain for some of the way the questions were asked, I don't envy the media members the Sens had there because there's so many angles to take and it wasn't a rather long press conference. So here's the thing that I love about Michael Andlauer. Some absolute bombshell quotes. He says, "Why I inherited this is beyond me." He's talking here about the Evgeny Dadonov situation. And he says, "Why I inherited it is beyond me." And that's the big quote, I think, of the day. He was very clear about how the way that the investigation went about, it took way longer. The trade happened almost 2.5 years ago. The original one with Dadonov, the recent one with Vegas was last summer. They did, completely. And I think what I want to say here is I think it feels like Andlauer to me is extremely frustrated with the NHL, and I don't think that's a crazy thing to say based on this. He called out the NHL for the gambling stuff, which again I'll get into with Shane Pinto, but the way he was talking about the way that the sale process went, because he's been frustrated with the league before any of this happened, right? Like he made some comments here and there about the process and how it felt like it was just drummed up for Hollywood. And I think that's a shot at the league. You go to this now when you get two calls, like Gary Bettman's not doing himself any favors with the new owner of the Ottawa Senators. For a guy who says he's an owner first, or maybe not he says, but for a guy who says that, I keep saying he says, this is different, me doing this on my own. So bear with me, everyone. I think we're still having a good time here. But the way that he talked about the league during the sale process and just after about the team, obviously, the way he described the process, it seemed like he was frustrated with how long it was, and it was geared at the NHL. That's the vibe I got. Now you pile that in with the way he's talking about the lack of communication with the gambling thing, the lack of communication on the Pinto front, how they they weren't aware of the allegations until training camp, which happens to coincide with when Michael Andlauer officially bought the team. I personally think that the NHL was holding back on these allegations and all these, laying the hammer down on these guys on the Sens for reasons like related to the sale. They didn't want to tarnish the sale and make him pay the most possible, which Andlauer also said. So that's one thing. I think he was very candid, which I love. The thing that's the best part to me anyway about all of this is how, he just accepted responsibility, because as an owner of a sports franchise, you just inherit the past of the franchise, right? And he acknowledged that. And that's kind of what he was saying about Dorion, was that this was an avoidable mistake. I have to hold you accountable. Now, he did say, again, like the caption here on the YouTube is Pierre Dorion fired as Senators GM. That's what the sources were saying. That's what everyone was reporting before the press conference. Andlauer opened it by saying that Pierre Dorion has resigned and he's been relieved of his duties. But then we needed some clarification. And I know we've got some questions about DJ there from Chris. I am looking at the chat here for everyone. We will get into that. I think Steve Staios, when I talk about Staios, we'll talk about the coaching staff a little bit more, just because he had more things to say in terms of hockey operations, because Staios is a very, very key part of this announcement today. I don't think this happens if Staios isn't on board as president of hockey ops. But I think overall, this to me, I think just the Pierre Dorion not being the GM anymore is a story today. We can get into the details of the draft pick compensation, the Pinto stuff, and the way Andlauer handled all that after. But right now, I just wanted to kind of talk about general manager Pierre Dorion. And personally, I don't think I've been hiding it this summer, this offseason, but I was not a fan of Pierre Dorion. I think it dragged on way too long and way longer than it should have. I'm not going to go out there and dance on this. And I'm going to say dance on this guy's grave. Obviously, he just lost his job. And I guess that's the analogy, but that's not what I'm trying to do here at all. And I don't think that anyone is. I don't think any Sens fan is going to be celebrating, because if anything, it leads to more questions. We've been in a very, while it hasn't been perfect at all, it's been a very known situation. You guess the tendencies, the media answers, the trades, the signings. It was predictable for a little bit, for better or for worse. The drafting, like all of that, that's all going to change now. And again, I don't know if it's for better or for worse. There are a lot of good arguments for what Pierre Dorion did for the Ottawa Senators. There's no denying that. It was an absolutely polarizing tenure. To put it lightly, I think personally, just off the top of my head, his best moves obviously were very recently, but his fingerprints are going to be all over this team for a long, long time. As long as Brady Tkachuk is an Ottawa Senator, Tim Stützle, Josh Norris, Thomas Chabot, like all of these guys are here because of Pierre Dorion. And I'm saying here, not even just in drafting, but long-term extensions. All of these guys who wanted to re-up in Ottawa, who wanted to play here, will be here because of Pierre Dorion. Now, I'm not saying that they're walking around the halls saying, I'm here because I love Dorion. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what they felt about the GM. literally just signing Thomas Chabot to an 8-year deal, signing Brady Tkachuk to a 7-year deal, drafting Brady Tkachuk in general creates the ripple effect. And I think at first glance, there's going to be a lot of reflecting on Pierre Dorion's tenure here, and a lot of reflecting on bad moves, on good moves, on all, the person he was, the way he treated the media, all of that. At its core, though, his fingerprints are going to be on this team for a long, long time. And there's no other way to put that. Now, as a fan of the team, as someone who's, we got a podcast that we talk about it, we dive into every single detail of this team and who, the decisions they make, the people they bring in, all of that. It's hard to kind of go into all of the details and the stories that I've heard from behind the scenes. It's no secret, I don't think. I think it's okay to say this to people that the media landscape in Ottawa has been, with the Melnyk tenure and Dorion being the GM, who wasn't always the best PR person, obviously had some heater quotes and would get defensive in press conferences. His relationship with media members was not strong, with most media members was not strong. And I think that reflected in the way the fans perceived him, whether it was fair or not. If I know that obviously as people who are in press conferences, you have to just report what they're saying. And they did do that. But I personally, what I think about Dorion is that he let opinions and the noise get to him too much. And it might sound hypocritical for those who watched, the last episode. I absolutely tore him to shreds. But as it's hard when, I'm a 22-year-old guy. I've been a Sens fan my whole life. Obviously it's pretty obvious. I love hockey. I grew up around it, played it my whole life. Pierre Dorion started as a scout in Ottawa in 2007. And I believe his dad was a scout. I don't think with Ottawa. I don't know. Maybe with Montreal. But Pierre himself had no hockey experience, like playing at a super, super high level, like a lot of executives do these days. There was no education experience for the executive stuff. So, a lot of the drafting and some of the trades he made, you could tell it was the mind of a scout. And again, this is off the top of my head. I will check this if it needs to be. But around the NHL, you look at general managers, executives, high-ranking executives, presidents, whatever it may be. For the most part, they either played in the NHL for an extended period of time or in general at all. Some of them are legends in the game, or they have experience with, like a educational background in managing people, sport management, whatever it is. And with Dorion, it was a case, I think, of a guy who was elevated to a role in circumstances that benefited the owner at the time, being Eugene Melnyk, aka those circumstances being we could pay him as little as we wanted because he won't cost as much as these high-ranking executives. Again, and that's not taking away from anything that Dorion did. I think it's hard to reflect right now, but I'm trying to do that in the best, the cleanest possible way. And I know we're seeing a lot of stuff here in the chat about DJ. Let's talk about DJ Smith. Let's do it. And no, Stu, I don't think Alfie will be the new rule. That would be crazy. If it is, then we'll talk about that. But man, you talk about the hate that I've put on Pierre Dorion the last week, whatever it is, even last episode, I would hate if it comes to that with Daniel Alfredson. Although Joe Sakic brought a cup to Colorado and he's a legend there already. So maybe that's the case. I don't know. But we'll see. So let's talk about DJ Smith. And I want to talk about Steve Staios. Obviously, Steve Staios is going to take over as interim general manager. I've talked about this a lot since Staios was hired. In Hamilton, the exact same thing happened. He took over. He was hired as president, then took over as GM sometime after, and it wasn't very long after he was hired. So again, don't be surprised if Staios just holds the tag. And also, I could see him hiring someone else, but we'll see where that all goes. But Staios had a good quote about DJ Smith. He just said, this guy is the players believe in him, which is what we've heard forever. I've gone on about it because the games they don't show up. It's just crazy that they still love DJ and are backing him so publicly when it looks like they're checked out. But Staios, I think it's tough to gauge because again, it's going to be a change of predictability for the general manager, the tendencies, whatever it is, but we'll get used to all of that. But when Dorion and Brady Tkachuk and all the players were saying, DJ's the right guy, we believe in him, but yet as fans, we're seeing the exact same story play out season after season. How are results expected? But when a guy like Steve Staios comes in, he's been here for 3 weeks. I genuinely, and maybe I'm naive, maybe I'm being positive, or being overly positive. When Staios talked about DJ Smith in that press conference, that was the biggest takeaway I had, is that he genuinely believes DJ is a good coach. And I know that might sound like I'm just trying to be a DJ Smith, enjoyer, a lover, whatever it is. I that's the way I interpreted his tone. I think with other things, you know what I'm going to do? This is what I'm going to bring up. I want people, and not right now, stay watching. We're happy to have you here. I'm happy to have you here. It's just me. In Staios' opening press conference with Pierre Dorion there beside him, when either of them were asked, mainly Staios, but when Staios was asked about Dorion's duties, to me, like even at the time, but now looking back, the way he spoke about DJ Smith, I felt a completely different vibe. The way he shut down when asked about Pierre last time, just saying it'll be day to day, whatever it is. And now I'm not saying that they planned on getting rid of him this soon. I don't think that was the plan. I really do believe that. But the way he spoke about DJ just now, to me, spoke volumes over the way he spoke about Pierre earlier, because maybe he wasn't expecting to evaluate DJ Smith, but I think he's genuinely surprised and more surprised about how well people speak about DJ and his staff around the rink, probably juxtaposed to the way they feel about Dorion. So when Steve Staios comes in and he's the new boss, he's the head honcho around, he's Dorion's boss, he's obviously going to be doing interviews with every single staff member in that place, including players, asking what they think of their GM and their coach. And if he's saying, if the tone and expression in his voice is indicative of how he values DJ, then it truly will be a results-based evaluation. And I think that's totally fair. I believe he might have even mentioned that. So I don't know, coaching staff, like the one thing we can say for Dorion, or sorry, for DJ and the staff, is that the leash is gone, and it's been gone in our heads for a while. They're all expiring. Like assistant coaches, DJ, this is their last year of their contract. So it's really a tryout for all of them anyway. And it probably would have been if Pierre was granted, autonomy for the rest of the season and had a say. But now I really do think that the hot seat is on for DJ and his staff, but it would have been anyway. The way we were blowing up after a 4-4 start, it would have been ridiculous if it wasn't. So that's all. Like it's really, this is upper management stuff. I know Brady is going to get asked about it tomorrow. All the guys are going to get asked about it because, frankly, this is the first GM change any of the core. This is crazy. You think about this, other than Chychrun and Claude Giroux and Korpisalo, maybe, but I think that's it. This is the first GM change for every single player on that roster. Let that sink in for a second. Every single player, at least core player, whatever it is, first GM change in their careers. That's wild to me to think about, obviously, other than Claude Giroux and Tarasenko. That's a good one there, John. Although Doug Armstrong has been there for a long time in St. Louis. I don't know if it was the only one he's had, but regardless, it just kind of maybe shows two things. It shows how uncommon a new GM is for players in their careers. And how long Pierre was here. So yeah, like it's a difficult thing. I think it's, I don't even want to say it's bittersweet, because I was ready for a change. So many fans were ready for a change a while ago. This is probably a few years overdue overall, but and I did mention too, like Andlauer was referring to how this should have been a lot of avoidable mistakes, all of this. And when he was talking about Pinto, which I want to get into right now, but when he talked about Pinto, he mentioned the salary cap, because before this gambling scenario, it was a salary cap pickle they found themselves in, they being Pierre Dorion, who put them in that scenario. So that's another thing we got to talk about, because the way Michael Andlauer talked about Shane Pinto and that gambling situation, and how he doesn't blame the young man. And I know a lot of people, I know that a lot of, gambling ads can be a lot for a lot of people. And I think that that's what Andlauer is getting at. And man, just absolutely buried the NHL. Just trying to find it here. Usually when I need to find a quote, I'll throw to Brennan to make him stall or something like that. So again, I really appreciate everyone who's in here right now, just listening to me talk for 20 minutes. This was obviously way too big of news to not discuss. Probably would have done it just for the first round pick compensation anyway, but the firing after. Another thing I want to do quickly, credit to Laleem's Martian and the streets. What I think, and he would probably admit this too, started as a bit of a bit for him, has turned into a very reputable source. And he broke 3 huge bits of Sens news in the last 2 weeks without anyone else breaking it first. So obviously he was a little bit fast last week, but as Andlauer said, they met last week. So Laleem's Martian, hat off to you, obviously, and he knows that, but I think he kind of got dragged through the mud a little bit, just in terms of how he was early on that call. So I wanted to give him some credit there. So this is the quote from Michael Andlauer, and I'm quoting Brennan, obviously, who's tweeting. He's at work right now, unfortunately. Just leave a like, subscribe to the YouTube page, say we miss you, Brennan. We hope you're back next time, and he will be. He's okay. So this is what Andlauer said. Quote, "You look at a young man who is making millions of dollars and representing the community, but he's 21 years old. Wayne Gretzky goes on MGM and talks about betting. Think about being injured, having time on your hands, and a cell phone." I think, I think I'm a bit younger than Shane Pinto. He's 21, obviously. He's 22 now, turning 23, whatever it is. That quote is hard to kind of put into words, like what that means. I think a lot of people are mentioning that Andlauer might face a fine from the league because of that and the comments on the Dadonov situation. I would imagine he voiced these opinions already to the NHL in those meetings, but maybe they don't like it when it's public. I don't know. It's obvious. What's awesome is he spoke the minds of Sens fans. How many times have we talked in the last week since the Pinto news dropped about how ridiculous it is that they're sponsored by sportsbook on their helmet? They have been for the last 2 seasons, 2 different sportsbooks. The broadcasts, and I know that, like, you know, I work for Bell Media, I work for CFRA, and Bell Media with TSN, with FanDuel, whatever it is. Obviously, it's a huge partnership. So I'm not gonna, I do traffic reads on the morning for the morning rush, and some of the ads are sports books. So it's everywhere. It's just a source of revenue for companies now, which you have to respect. So Andlauer going out and saying that with super, I don't want to say security, but like he's been paraded around by the league. It's an owners league. Like I said, Bettman likes the owners, tries to cater to the owners. For him to go out and say that, I can't remember a time that a owner of an NHL team outspoke against the commissioner's ruling quite like that. Actually, funny enough, the only thing I can think of is 2013, so 10 years ago, when Erik Karlsson's Achilles was severed by Matt Cook, and Eugene Melnyk was saying he's going to go to the league and appeal it. It's the only thing I can remember, to be honest. Like it's very, very rare for an owner to do it, right? You hear it from coaches with refs and GMs every now and then will complain about stuff, but from an owner of a team, a brand new owner, the newest, and a guy who's been in the league for a while with Montreal as an owner, it speaks volumes. It really does. So an absolutely great press conference from Michael Andlauer and Steve Staios. Again, one thing we need to make clear, it was a mutual resignation with Pierre Dorion. Again, mutual resignation. I'll leave it at that. I think the writing was on the wall. Even again, the way that Andlauer was speaking in the press conference alluded to the fact that it was more of a okay. So I'm just scrolling on Twitter right now, and I know that it's not a fun way to run a live show here, but one thing that we can expect is transparency from the Ottawa Senators, which we have not gotten for decades under Andlauer. Like, we can expect transparency. I said at the time when Staios came on as president, you cannot be in better hands than this guy. And I know it's all like easier said than done, whatever, but judging off of the way they handle media alone, Steve Staios is millions of times better than Pierre Dorion. And I know that's not just the job. You got to do the work, build relationships around the league. But this to me just like what you could see, and I know that Peter Chiarelli's name was being thrown out there, and I wanted to get into that, but I don't think that's even a remote possibility right now. And not that I'm, citing any sources here, but like he wasn't even mentioned. I think he's still working with the Blues. He's in Sweden or whatever it is, scouting for them or something. I saw floating around on there. So, we'll talk about Chiarelli if that becomes in rumors later down the line, but just when all these things were happening, right? Like in years past, I want to take everyone to years past when, we'd have moments where the turmoil was hitting, like the Uber video, and help me out here. Throw things in the chat. Like let's do this. Since April 2016, when Dorion was hired, throw any crazy off ice stuff, not on ice, shenanigan that went on with the Sens under Dorion's watch, because he was the boss. He was. And unfortunately, it's going to reflect on him. But I just want, like, if anyone wants to throw a comment in there, you can. Don't have to. I can maybe throw it up here too for everyone. I'm just trying to get everyone involved. If you throw a comment, it'll go up there on my left, I guess, or your right. Like the Uber video. So my point is, all these things happen off the ice this week. The Pinto suspension, the Dadonov thing, and you can feel a little bit like the sky's falling, like you're just, not confident in the direction of the team. But then as soon as Pierre Dorion, or as soon as Staios and Andlauer get up to the podium today, for me, I'm confident. I just feel confident. I feel safe. It's like a nice bear hug or something like that. There we go. Yeah. So Kevin and John both there, throwing up their comments. The Carlson Hoffman, like this is perfect examples of when the sky was falling in Ottawa, like in 2018, 2019, nothing was going right. Everyone wanted out. We were the laughing stock of the league, and it felt like there were never brighter days ahead. And I think with Andlauer and Staios right now, I feel so confident that when they make a mistake, they're going to talk about it. They're going to own up to it and be transparent. That's all any of us, I think, are asking for in the media with the Sens. So Brent with another good one there. What about the Hockey Night in Canada interview where Dorion just sits quiet for 30 seconds? And then I believe that preceded the infamous "We are a team" quote that Pierre Dorion had. And I remember exactly when that was. That was a Kraft Hockeyville game, and I guess maybe Newfoundland or something like that. And it was immediately a few days after they traded Erik Karlsson. So it was a gloomy time for Senators fans. If people might be rolling their eyes at me saying like the media stuff matters and all of that, just like Brent just ignited something in me. Think of all the quotes Dorion's dropped over the years that are just ridiculous. You've got "We are a team." You've got "Proudest day as GM" when he traded Mark Stone away for pennies on the dollar. You've got the rebuild is over, and after all those blew up, you could tell the way he was speaking, he wouldn't give definitive statements. They didn't put a playoff expectation on this team because of that reason. So yeah, we can go on and on about Dorion, but it's not really about right now justifying why he's gone. I think everyone knows. You can argue maybe, and like, I don't know if anyone in the comments wants to mention some stuff about Dorion that was good. And I know there is a lot of good. And I really don't believe that he's a bad general manager. It just snowballed here. And how often does a GM get to fix their own mistakes? It never happens. So, and then, unparalleled success there from Stu. That's a great one as well. Melnick threatening to move the team the day before the Heritage Classic. Like, yeah, this is like a bit of a therapy session, because it feels like the sky is falling with the Pinto stuff and the no first round pick in one of the next 3 years because of a penalty. But I don't know, man. Like, to me, I just feel, I get the frustration from Andlauer, but I feel confident in this hockey team and I feel confident in the franchise because of the hands that they're putting the hockey team in Steve Staios and Michael Andlauer. I think that press conference was really, really good, because he was candid. He was still funny, cracked some jokes, but when it got down to business and he had to answer some tough questions, he answered them. And so did Steve Staios. So I have no doubts about any of that. I'm trying to brainstorm here. Obviously, Twitter is buzzing right now, or X, sorry. Um, and I think the main reaction here just seems to be the way Michael Andlauer, or sorry, like his quotes, the way he talked about the NHL, like it's unbelievable. And yeah, so I'm not really sure where to go with this next, to be honest. Trading a third for Hamnick when the asking price was a fourth. Dorion, his famous quote there was, "We didn't have a fourth, so I just offered a third." That's another good one. Yeah, you know what? You know what? I don't know why I'm trying to be so respectful. This is a guy who got to live a dream for 8 years as general manager of his favorite hockey team, or one of his favorite hockey teams, whatever. So throw your worst Dorion trades or funniest moments in the comments, and let's just have a little bit of a therapy session, because I think this was a special, like, it's a special day. And not that we have to celebrate again, like I'm saying, we're not celebrating. We're reminiscing on the crazy moves that have happened for this franchise. And obviously, he's a big part of why they're big ones. Gus for Talbot. Look, man, we're going to find out tomorrow. I think Cam Talbot's going to get the start. If he comes in and just shuts the door, it's going to be tough. There's going to be a lot of moves now, I think, where that player or players, draft picks, whatever you want to call it, are going to play against the Sens. And we're going to have the feeling now of that wasn't our current GM, which is a good thing. It's a good thing that we can look at moves like that and just be like, you know what? The person who made those moves isn't here, doesn't have his hands on the team anymore. And that's a good thing. You can look at the Matt Murray trade. That was brutal as well. Just, I mean, both of them, when you think about it, like, they didn't really need to clear that cap space last season when you think about it. So yeah, man, forgive me if I'm going, on pauses here. I'm talking to no one, but I'm also talking to all the guys in the chat here, which is fun. Yeah, Matt, I wouldn't recommend jumping off the Peace Tower, but I understand the sentiment. That would really suck. If he outplays Corpusalo in general, that would suck. Second round pick on Ben Roger. Look, the 2021 draft is like shockingly bad. As good as the 2021 was, 2020 will probably be Pierre Dorion's crowning achievement in general. Just Stützle, Sanderson, Ridley Gregg, Marilyn, like a lot. Zaitsev trade. Wow. I can't like believe how many moves this man made that were just mind boggling. Zaitsev for CC has to be the worst trade in Sens history. And I know there's also, I'm being sarcastic, but there's lots of bad ones. That was ridiculous. Felt like even then Dorion was on pins and needles with the goalie reaches. Yeah. So you know what's funny, actually, with Craig Anderson being honored recently, you think they let him go, they let him walk after the 2019 season. Why? Or maybe he played in 2020, I think he did, and they let him walk. So the 3D or 2D era, when they got the new jerseys in that COVID shortened 2021 season, like, they didn't bring Anderson back. And I think they've started like 14 goalies since then, which makes absolutely no sense. That's wild to me. I'll bring up some other ones for people. Eric Goodbranson didn't have to happen. You kept him for a year. Braden Cole, they traded Ryan Callahan's LTIR space for a second round pick, Cedric Paquette, and Braden Coburn. They traded a second round pick. John just threw it in there. A second round pick for Derek Stepan. They traded a second round pick and I believe another prospect for Matt Murray. And that's a good point by Matt. Like, you know what? This is much more fun. I don't know why I'm trying to be so nice. Let's reminisce and just dump on all the bad stuff this guy did, because that's what today is about. To be honest, he was there long enough. I've changed opinions. It took me 35 minutes. Let's dump on him. Let's do it. Yeah. His best trade was Erik Karlsson. Let's guess, or not guess. I'm going to walk through how lucky that Erik Karlsson trade was. So in 19, Karlsson's first full season, like it was 2018-19, the Sharks are a wagon. They make the conference finals, lose to the Blues, who end up winning the cup. that could have been a Stanley Cup winning San Jose Sharks team. The draft pick was supposed to be 2019, but was conditional for 2020. There is, and I know that no one is saying that there's absolutely no way that anyone in the league would have anticipated the San Jose Sharks being a bottom 5 team that season. Quite frankly, Dorion probably lucked out, and the Sens did, obviously, but I'm just going to say Dorion because that's the past Sens. Pierre Dorion lucked out in the fact that season ended early. We missed 7-8 games, and the Sharks missed 7-8 games. They win a few of those. That's not the third overall pick anymore. So it really worked out in the Sens' favor. That was the one bit of lucky, a lucky break that we got in the rebuild was having those 2 picks in the top 5. The picks alone, I think you can give them credit for at the top because, way back in 2020, when I started blogging and writing and stuff, and the Sens were just really bad. It was that season where we were cheering for them to lose every game. That year I went through a bunch of the past Stanley Cup winning teams. So the most recent at the time was the St. Louis Blues. Every team for the last decade before that had at least one top 5 pick on their team. So you need a top 5 pick basically to be a cup contender. Obviously at least 5 teams pick in the top 5 every year. So you have to hit on it. And I think to his credit, they hit on Tim Stützle, they hit on Jake Sanderson, and they hit on Brady Tkachuk. And Michael Andlauer mentioned those 3 guys as people who will have Pierre Dorion's fingerprints all over it. So that's what's crazy about the Karlsson trade. They got lucky. Let's go through some more here that were thrown up. I don't know why I took that off because now the new ones will go there, but we've got some good ones. Finishing every season strong with young guys and then getting guys like Goodbranson, Coburn, and Josh Brown in the offseason hurt my soul. I completely agree. I understand the justification for getting those guys, and I understand it. Doesn't mean I agree with it though. They could have pivoted. I think Devon Toews was for 2 second-round picks, and he's one of the best defensemen in the NHL. Stuff like that could have, expedited this process a lot more. Step on for a second is crazy. But that's a good point by Stu that, they just would have picked another bum. I like that. There were a lot of, and I still believe in Tyler Boucher. He can't stay healthy, but it was really funny seeing, why are we getting up in arms about them just losing another Tyler Boucher? But I like that Staios is already saying we're going to analyze which one we think is the right one to give up. I would imagine if they make the playoffs this season, they'll give up this one just because they still have the Red Wings and Bruins or the Bruins one. Yes, John Zibanejad was actually Pierre Dorion. That was his first big trade he made. Crazy we're going all the way back, and one of the best centermen in the NHL is on another team because of Pierre Dorion. That's a great point. I didn't hate that trade. I still don't hate it because Zibanejad would have been gone in the rebuild anyway. That trade was made to get a better player, in brackets. But I think Derek Brassard proved that he was a great addition for that playoff run. I still stand by that, but it's still obviously a trade can look good one year and then look terrible the next year, and that's on you as the GM. And that trade looks absolutely brutal on him. DeBrincat alone, man. Wow, yeah. Here's a good question. Do you think Dorion's his last 3 seasons, do you think those are grounds for being fired? Let's start in, or maybe I did that question of the day the other day about what's been his worst move since 2020 or the 2020 draft. So after getting Stützle and Sanderson, basically the 2D era, they wore those 2D jerseys, the nice ones that shortened COVID year. So since then, has he made any egregious moves? Not awful ones, but a lot of the stuff people are mentioning, the step-on trade, Goodbranson, Coburn, Josh Brown, Talbot, Gustafson, there's a lot of moves that are questionable. Trading DeBrincat for a 7th overall pick, trading a 12th overall pick for Jacob Chikrin with no playoff appearances to show for it. I mean, it's tough. It's tough. It really is because actually, you know what's tougher is that as fans, we're still really bullish on this team, and we should be for good reason. But there were a lot of red flags during this tenure. I think the more we sit on them and the more we reflect, that'll come out. And I alluded earlier just to like how many, how behind the scenes, just like especially in the early days during that rebuild, how ugly it was. And I know it wasn't really, not a lot of it was common, out in their knowledge, but a lot of it was. It was just obvious. It was an absolute dumpster fire. And yeah, Celtic Canadian. I agree, man. I agree. Or I it's hard to. I'm sure people can read that there. What Celtic Canadian said. I think Chiarelli won't be that bad as a replacement with Staios there to hold him accountable. Have to remember he did lead a team to a cup with that Bruins, and he built that. He did. I think with the Oilers, and I know a lot of people are going to be like, oh, he still made these bad trades, and he did, and you can't defend that. But but with the Oilers, you got to remember he took over when they drafted Connor McDavid. Like his first move was drafting McDavid, and the Oilers were a team that had so much talent. It's almost like if the Sens had all these drafted players, and then almost not even like getting Chikrin to brink it, but if like last year they tanked and got Connor Bedard, so you get a new GM then, and then it's like sort of similar. I want to say like all of the top picks that the Oilers had. So they were in dysfunction, and Oilers ownership is also notoriously not very easy, I don't think, to deal with. And that, again, that's just me. I'm speculating, and I'm not defending the moves Chiarelli made. Like Larson for Taylor Hall looked bad at the time, and probably still isn't great. The rumor that he wanted to do CC for Hall straight up is, again, also bad. But to me, I think that's pressure from ownership. It's get rid of one of these guys who's been here for 8 years and hasn't done anything, and go get me a defenseman. The defenseman market wasn't great, so he was looking at Adam Larson and Cody Ceci. Like, I think that's what happened. But I'm looking at Chiarelli in Boston, like everyone said, with Claude Julien, who might become in Ottawa. Both of them are from the area, been around here for a while, and they both won a cup in Boston. I don't know. I wouldn't hate that. It's yeah, like I don't know how people feel about most of Pierre. I'm just reading the comments here. Most of the Pierre Dorion's moves were no brainers. Any other GM worth their salt would have made those moves. Hard to disagree. It's hard to disagree. I think the only ones you can maybe push back on that are Sanderson, Tkachuk. Stutzlo was pretty consensus, but like Tkachuk and Sanderson were off the board, not by 10 and 12 picks, but they were off the board at the time. They were not projected to go there. Protecting CC over Mathot. Justin, that's a banger. That might be the best one we have right there. That might be it. That is absolutely early days Dorion as well. That might be the worst move he's made. And I'm going to clip that for Mark Mathot right there. That's crazy. Yeah. I didn't even think about that. That's a great point. So let's go back. The Sens tried to get, so obviously in that protection era, the first one with Vegas, where Vegas got an absolute wagon, right out of the gate. The Sens elected to protect, I think, 7 forwards and 3D. So they protected Karlsson. Dion Phaneuf had a full no move clause. Let's go back to those full move. Pierre Dorion might be seeing no movement clauses in his sleep. But yeah, I think Phaneuf had a full no trade, no move, whatever it is. So the Sens had to get him to waive it so they could expose him. They asked him, and Phaneuf said no. So they had to choose who to protect, Ceci or Mathot. The Sens went with the younger Cody Ceci. And then 2 years later, traded Cody Ceci for Nikita Zaitsev and Connor Brown. That's a great one. Yeah. And yeah, Brent here also adding some context there. The Vegas wanted a 2nd-round pick for the Sens to not, or for them to not take Mathot. So they're basically bribing them, and it worked with Florida. And they took Riley Smith and Jonathan Marchessault, who are franchise legends in Vegas now, Stanley Cup champs. Really funny. So yeah, that's a great one that I didn't even think about. So good on Justin there for bringing that one up. Stu talking about how, can we talk about how half of our draft picks in the last 5 years were based on bloodlines, connections, and character? Yep. Yep, that was the philosophy. Clearly, the philosophy going in. He was the one who set that precedent. I don't hate it overall. I think they have a lot of great people in the organization, which is a good thing. But when you only base it on that, I think when all this hockey operations staff gets expanded and has been expanded already, people might get concerned about too many cooks in the kitchen. And there's a lot of pointing to Eugene Melnyk and how the way he ran his front office, like he had no money. Dorion himself, even in Staios' opening press conference, said that he's been begging for help for years. I don't buy that for a second. I think Pierre had an issue working with people. Pierre Maguire is a great, example. Trent Mann didn't last long in the AGM role. Like the writing is a little bit on the wall there. Like there was one, I, th- I think when Eugene Melnyk passed away, there was this sense that we're through it. We did it. Pierre's going to be a new man without the reins, without, this evil owner looking over him the whole time, this bad person. But when examples started flowing out, kept coming in, I should say, about just the lack of professionalism, the lack of collaboration with other executives. I don't think he welcomed new people in that sphere because they questioned and doubted him moves that he would make, and that's why some of these moves were made. Like, that's what I'm saying. Like, when there's not different philosophies and you just go with one, and we're fed a narrative for years and years and years, like this is going to work, trust the rebuild, unparalleled success. You know what? On that note, Pierre Dorion is responsible for why the rebuild happened. He came to Eugene Melnyk with a plan to rebuild. Eugene was not a fan of rebuilding. It was not his idea. Pierre sold him on it. That's just the all of this pain and I think long playoff drought, longest in franchise history, was a result of Dorion just in over his head. And you can't, it's hard to, and again, I'm not like celebrating here. I'm here. We're here to reflect. This is really here to have a reflection on the way that this guy, went about his business. It was far from precedented, and around the league, it didn't, you know, uh, different fan bases would, laugh at the Sens for the way they drafted and the way their players were, the funding around the team was very small market, and it didn't really indicate a Canadian market, I should say. But the off ice shenanigans were, again, because of Eugene Melnyk, and that's fine. Because that's going to change now. The Andlauer's here. That's all gone out the window. Even when Eugene passed away, that changed. The thing with Dorion was they didn't conduct their hockey operations like other NHL teams. And that, to me, is indicative of the problem that was here in Ottawa from when Eugene was still here and still with us. So that's why I think this move just had to happen. I the run of unparalleled success, I'm sure that was mostly Melnyk. I don't think that's a thing that the Sens wanted to have public or that Dorion wanted to have public. And obviously COVID derailed it a little bit. But Dorion's rebuild plan, the 112-page plan he brought to Eugene Melnyk in Barbados in February of 2018, there is no way in hell, absolutely no way in hell, it didn't have the Sens in the playoffs after 2023. So my point is, there's no way that, thanks, Brendan, appreciate it in the chat there. There's no way that Dorion had the plan to not have made the playoffs by this season. I think the plan was to have made it a couple of years ago or already, and he was scrambling. And I don't think that's crazy to say. You can, the bad start in 2021 put them out of the playoffs. If they went 500 against the Oilers that year when they lost 9 games to the Edmonton in that Canadian division. If they even went 500 against them, they were in the playoffs. You win 4 or 5 of those games, they're in the playoffs. 2022, COVID ravages the team in November. Injuries, you name it. 2021 November, so the 2021-22 season, they're way out of it. Don't even sniff the playoffs. Don't come close. Eugene Melnyk passes away March 2022. That season, or that summer, Pierre Maguire gets fired by Pierre Dorion. And then they trade for DeBrincat, trade the 7th overall pick on draft day. We're all saying, whoa, this is a big deal. Our owner's gone. The bad times are done. We're safe. We're saved. We're moving picks now. We don't care about the rebuild. Dorion's a new man. The summer of Pierre is here. Trades Philip Gustafson for Cam Talbot. We're buzzing. Signs Claude Giroux. Buys out Michael Del Zotto. Moves Matt Murray for future considerations, and moves Matt Murray with a few other draft picks. And then they stumble out of the gate again in November of 2022. Last year, they stumble. They're 5-8. They had a battle on November 25th. I'll never forget this. Playing the Ducks. The loser would have been in last place in the NHL. They were last place in the NHL on American Thanksgiving. After all those moves, after everything. Team's up for sale, though. We're looking good. Pierre's got to, Pierre has to make the team look good for the owners, whatever it is. Maybe that's what the summer of Pierre was about. It was about getting the fans reinvigorated. He signs Tim Stützle, signs Josh Norris that summer. The core is locked in. The core is bought in. Trades for Jacob Chychrun at the trade deadline 2023. Makes a pretty great move on a guy who they were rumored to have a long time. Price was astronomically high, rumored. He gets it down to a reasonable price. Makes a great trade at the deadline. They win 5 in a row around then. They're 3 points out with 2 games in hand on the Florida Panthers. They lose 5 in a row. They're out of the playoffs. We're not making it this year. That's 6 straight seasons, and under Pierre Dorion, no playoffs. And they don't do anything. And they did nothing. I don't know if he didn't have the go-ahead on making a coaching change, but one thing is for sure. He wanted to wait for ownership's approval. Michael Andlauer got control of the team in September, went on TSN 1200 with JR and Steve Lloyd sometime after he took over the team that week, September, week before or during training camp. Andlauer said that Dorion came up to him and said, "What do you want to do with DJ Smith?" That right there explains the entire tenure of Pierre Dorion's time as Ottawa GM. He did not have autonomy in the early years. He had to go to the board or whoever because he was in a makeshift GM position, if I want to say. So he did have control. He did do the stuff, but every move had to be approved. And that's on brand, I think, for what we expected. But my point is, we're in the middle of a 4-4 start here. I don't know what's going to happen with this team in the next month, this core. A lot is going to be questioned. Certain players, like no one's safe, I don't think, except for Tkachuk, Sanderson, and Stützle, pretty much, So my point is, I just laid out that entire timeline in the last 2 years of where we've gone hype, super high, all the way down, like the highs and lows. And I think the problem was that Pierre Dorion rode those highs and lows with us. And I think that's going to be the mark on his tenure as Sens GM, that when things got bad, they got really bad for him as well. But when they were good, he rode that high with the rest of us. And while that might seem like it's kind of innocent and that's good, that's not what you need as a general manager of an NHL team. You have to have your head screwed on right, win or lose, winning streak, losing streak, whatever it is. Now, I'm not saying I didn't like the Chychrun trade because of the winning streak. I think it was great. The team showed they deserved it. But to not make a coaching change this summer when you've got 1 year left on DJ's deal, you could have started fresh. And I'm not doubting DJ, but that is going to be the mark on his career, that they didn't make a change, maybe because the board was telling him not to. It would have been a good time to do it. That's just kind of my thinking, is like the lack of accountability for DJ Smith and his staff mixed with the messaging for DJ and his staff being like, we're trying to rebuild. We're not trying to, I'm not giving you a roster to win. Like, I don't know if in 2021, when Stützle was a rookie in that season, are we really trusting that the message from Dorion to DJ was we're trying to lose? No shot. They were trying to win. They were all in, not all in, but they were more invested in that season than they were the year before. And that's not even up for debate. So I think it was just a lot of backpedaling. It was a lot of, we're not putting a label on this season. We were happy playing meaningful games last year. That's what the Sens said. They were good with where they got last year. But then you go to the captain, Brady Tkachuk, who said they folded under the pressure of last season during November. The messaging was mixed. Pierre Dorion had a complicated tenure as GM. And yeah, I can't believe I just talked for an hour basically to myself, but you guys have been pretty fun in the chat. There's a lot. Yeah, the summer of Pierre was his highlight of his tenure for sure. It was fun, man. I got a t-shirt. I did everything. I was on board. I was my whole brand, I think, on Twitter is not a brand even. But I was a part of the Pierre Dorion fan club. It was just my bio. It wasn't actually a fan club, but the first, time I tried to like make a name, if that makes sense, just kind of defending some of the moves he made in, like, at the time it was 2020, I want to say. Didn't hate them, but like I said, since 2020, it's been 3 years, man. 4 years pretty much. And that's too much time to not have any results. So it was time for this to happen. I'm glad if it had to happen like this, because now Staios can get his hands in there, not let Dorion just kind of do what he thinks was best. And I know I see that from Brent there, like, would we be satisfied with Dorion's choice as next coach? Like, almost, it sounds really depressing, but we wouldn't have a choice, like, it would be that or nothing. And yeah, like, it's crazy. He only hired 2 coaches, really. He promoted Mark Crawford when they let go of Guy Boucher, but he only hired 2 coaches in 8 years. And that might be what sealed his fate. I think, actually, you know what? It's a good, interesting analogy. Like, if they were 8-0 or 7-1 or 6-3 or whatever it is, or 6-2, I still think this happens. I do. And I don't think any of us would be questioning it. I laid out every coach or every Canadian team in 2019, since 2019, when DJ Smith was hired, has hired a new coach, has both simultaneously hired a new coach and made the playoffs at some point in that tenure, which is crazy to think about, that we've just been sitting here with the exact same regime for 4 years with no results. It's unacceptable to me. So times are changing. It's a new era for Ottawa Senators hockey officially. I think when Andlauer and Staios came in, it felt good and everything, but it was still the same hands on the team. That's not the case anymore. Pierre Dorion is out as Ottawa Senators general manager. He had been the GM for 8 years, more than 8 years. It was 8.5, April of 2016. It's crazy to think about. Yeah, I'm a little bit speechless, even though I wasn't for an hour there. That was actually a very long stream, but the drink throwing the clip as soon as we close out this. Oh yeah. Wait, I don't know what that means, Matt. I'm kind of confused. If you want to clarify that. Oh, I see what you mean. Dorion throwing his drink. Yeah. He did have some good moments. You guys want to throw in your funniest Pierre Dorion moments? He dropped some good quotes, for better or for worse, obviously. But like, he had some moments, man. He was a pretty funny guy. I think he's a great guy to like hang out with. It seems like, I think he's got some buddies who are on Twitter. Unfortunately, if I was Dorion, I would tell them to stay away because only toxic. But that was a good clip. Yeah. He's had some memes. I got some pictures of Dorion that are just great for reactions. Very reactionary guy, but I want a robot as a GM. I want what Vegas has. I know they get scrutinized for being cutthroat. They have 3 coaches in 6 seasons missed the playoffs once and they won the Stanley Cup. So that to me is what I want to be as a sports fan. Yeah. So that I think that's going to do it, man. That's been fun. I want to get on Twitter and look at what people are saying, because it's kind of, this is what we, this doesn't happen all the time. A GM getting fired in your city. It never happens. Brian Murray stepped down, and I can't remember another GM firing, to be honest, which is crazy. So yeah. Melnick Borowiecki interview, also the funniest thing ever. There's another thing on Dorion. Why didn't they just keep Boro? Like, why didn't Anderson stick around? Like, all of that is just, there's gonna be so many things that just come out that we remember in the next few years, and we're just like, wow, how did that, like, how was that okay? Yeah. Nonetheless, this is a positive day. I know we got Dr. First round pick. Jared Cowan, like, yeah, these are lots of great moments here. We'll be breaking it down on the Everyday Sens YouTube page. If everyone could leave a like on the YouTube page, subscribe if you aren't already. Head over to everydaysens.com and subscribe as well. We've got some analysis on there all the time. But yeah, just leave a subscription for us. These are new days for the Ottawa Senators. You will not hear me harping on Pierre Dorion anymore, because he is not the general manager of the Ottawa Senators anymore. So thank you everyone for joining. Really appreciate everyone sticking around with me. It's just me and my ugly face here. So thank you. And we'll see everyone next time. Not sure what, we might have a pregame one for you in store tomorrow. We will find out. So thanks everyone for joining. Subscribe to the Everyday Sens podcast, and go Sens go.